Evelyn Brown had worked her entire life as a janitor, an unnoticed shadow in the gleaming offices, until one day she was accused of stealing an expensive watch simply because she was an elderly black woman. Publicly humiliated and rejected, she found herself at the center of a corporate conspiracy, where systemic racism and power intertwined into a force that threatened to destroy her life. But when the truth began to surface, even the most powerful did not expect that Evelyn would rise from her knees and challenge the system that had oppressed her for so long. What she did would stun even the most experienced. But let's start from the beginning. Evelyn Brown, a 63-year-old black woman, had always seen herself as someone who knew her place in the world. For over 30 years, she worked as a janitor at one of the city's largest corporations, where the tall buildings, expensive suites, and shiny offices seemed like a world she would never enter except through her job. Her day began early, before sunrise, and ended late in the evening when the last employees left their workstations. Everyone knew Evelyn. She was friendly, always smiled despite her difficult life. She didn't have big dreams or ambitions. She only wanted one thing: to live her days with dignity, expecting little from life. However, her dedication didn't make her invisible to those who looked down on her. Executives rarely spoke to her, and some employees didn't even bother to say hello when passing her in the corridor. But one morning, everything changed. The company's CEO, Mr. Jackson, discovered that his expensive gold watch had disappeared from his desk after a long meeting. Panic ensued in the office. The watch was not just a valuable item. It was a gift from his late father, a symbol of status and family memories. Arthur Patterson, the head of HR, immediately launched an investigation. Soon, his suspicion fell on Evelyn. With no evidence other than the fact that she had cleaned Mr. Jackson's office the previous evening, Arthur accused her of theft. His accusations were swift and cold. He called Evelyn into his office for questioning. "Miss Brown," he began sternly, his voice dripping with concealed contempt, "you understand that Mr. Jackson's watch is not only expensive, but also emotionally significant. You were in his office last night, so how do you explain its disappearance?" Evelyn felt her heart sink. She knew she hadn't stolen anything. She knew she was being accused simply because of her skin color, but the words were hard to form. Fear, mixed with humiliation, overwhelmed her. Her hands trembled as she quietly said, "I didn't take it, sir. I was just doing my job, like always." Arthur smirked as he shuffled the papers on his desk. "Of course, that's what you'd say. But you see, Ms. Brown, at our level, this is too serious. We can't just take your word for it. We'll investigate, but let me warn you, the consequences will be severe if the watch isn't found." The next day, despite a lack of evidence, Evelyn was summoned to a full office meeting. In front of her colleagues, she was publicly accused of theft. The faces of her co-workers showed a mixture of indifference and hidden judgment. No one stood up for her. It seemed her fate was sealed. Arthur stood at the center, delivering the accusations with such confidence as if it had been an established fact. "We cannot tolerate theft in our company," he declared loudly, scanning the room. "We believe that honesty and trust are the foundation of our organization. I think everyone understands that action must be taken." Evelyn couldn't believe her ears. Her whole life, the years she had given to this company, had turned to dust in an instant. Despite this, she remained calm. She knew the only thing she had left in this situation was her dignity. She was immediately fired, and the police were called to question her. Nearby employees watched, some with curiosity, others with disdain. No one expressed sympathy or support. To them, she was just another janitor who, it seemed, had made a mistake and was paying the price. Evelyn left the office with her head bowed, but inside her, rage and pain boiled. She knew this was an injustice, but she also knew that this fight was only just beginning. After her humiliating dismissal, Evelyn returned home, feeling as though the world around her was falling apart. She lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city, once full of warmth and life. Now, the house seemed empty and cold, reflecting her inner state. Without a job, She didn't know how she would continue to support herself and her family. Her son Marcus lived on his own, but was always there for her when she needed help. Evelyn struggled to find her strength, but the sense of injustice and betrayal wouldn't leave her. It was as if all the years of honest work had been erased in a single day. She no longer trusted anyone, neither her colleagues who had turned away from her, nor the system that so easily accepted false accusations. The fear of the future and growing anxiety made her think that her life would never return to normal. That same night, sitting at the kitchen table and reflecting on what had happened, she called her son. Marcus was a young lawyer who worked to defend the rights of black people. He listened to her story without interrupting, but with each word, his anger grew. "Mom, this is absurd. They can't just accuse you without evidence. This is clearly racism. They thought they could sweep everything under the rug because you're black and elderly. But they're wrong." His voice was full of determination. "We're not going to sit idly by. We'll take them to court. They can't treat people like this." At first, Evelyn hesitated. Her life experience told her that justice was unattainable. How many times had she faced discrimination, seen her friends and neighbors endure humiliation just because of their skin color? But there was such confidence in her son's voice that she decided to trust him. This wasn't just about honor. It was about her life, her name, which they had so easily tarnished. Marcus wasted no time. He contacted colleagues and human rights organizations that supported his fight. Together, they began preparing the documents to file a lawsuit against the company. But despite her son's and his allies' support, Evelyn couldn't shake her inner fear. She wasn't ready for a long battle, but knew she had no other choice. Meanwhile, Arthur Patterson and his team did everything they could to cover up the matter. They used their connections in the local police to speed up the investigation and close it as quickly as possible. Despite the lack of evidence, the police continued to press charges against Evelyn, relying solely on Arthur and his team's words. Soon, Evelyn received a court summons. She felt a new wave of fear. She had to endure humiliation, endless interrogations, accusatory looks, and the smug smiles of those who believed her to be guilty. But Marcus and his team didn't give up. They started a social media campaign, telling Evelyn's story and raising awareness about systemic racism in corporations. A video featuring Evelyn's story quickly spread across the internet. People began to support her, sharing their own stories of unfair treatment in the workplace. Comments from prominent activists and journalists started to appear, joining the campaign. Soon, the story spread beyond the city and caught the attention of national media. The public began to demand justice. But despite the growing support, Evelyn struggled with doubt every day. She saw how her life was changing before her eyes, but wasn't sure she could handle the pressure. Memories of the shameful accusation constantly resurfaced in her mind, with each of Arthur's words searing into her consciousness. However, the support from her family and the community gradually began to instill confidence in her. She realized that her fight was not only important for herself, but also for others who faced similar injustice every day. Now, it wasn't just Evelyn's personal battle. It had become a fight for the rights of those the system routinely oppressed. After Evelyn's story gained attention on social media and in the press, the pressure on the company increased dramatically. Every week, her son Marcus gave interviews explaining how systemic racism and bias continued to affect the lives of black people. Evelyn's story became a symbol of the injustice and inequality that many black workers faced. Support from human rights organizations and influential figures gave the case new momentum. Soon, journalists began their own investigation, delving into the company's history and its management team. What they uncovered attracted even more attention. Arthur Patterson, who had been the key accuser in Evelyn's case, turned out to be far from the flawless figure he tried to appear as. It was revealed that he had been involved in several instances of biased behavior toward black employees, and complaints about his conduct had been previously ignored by the leadership. The biggest revelation came when a former employee of the company, a white man named Thomas, decided to come forward publicly. Thomas had worked in HR under Arthur, and confirmed that Evelyn had been accused without any evidence. He described how Arthur had deliberately stoked the situation, claiming, "The janitor is definitely guilty." Thomas also mentioned that Arthur had been involved in internal financial misconduct, but no one had dared speak out, fearing retribution. This statement became a turning point. Marcus, being an experienced lawyer, quickly responded to the new information. He filed a request for the case to be reviewed and demanded an audit of the entire company. Support from the media and the public only grew, and now the company found itself at the center of a major scandal. At the same time, the police launched an official investigation, as it became clear that the charges against Evelyn had been made based on racial prejudice. Arthur Patterson, who had previously maintained an unshakable confidence, was now visibly nervous. He tried to hide his involvement in the misconduct, but the investigation began uncovering more and more evidence of his guilt. He was forced to step down, and soon his name became associated not with success and power, but with corruption and racial discrimination. The company, in an attempt to salvage its reputation, decided to take decisive action. The leadership publicly apologized to Evelyn and promised to work with human rights organizations to eradicate discriminatory practices within the company. But for Evelyn, this was not enough. Her life had been destroyed, and she knew that a simple apology wasn't enough to restore the years and peace she had lost. Just when it seemed the fight was nearing its end, a new unexpected witness emerged. Mr. Jackson's own assistant, the CEO of the company. This person confirmed that on the eve of the watch's disappearance, Mr. Jackson had been discussing the possibility of selling it on the black market due to financial problems. It turned out that the watch had never been stolen. It had been hidden by Jackson himself, who planned to sell it to cover his debts. This news shook the entire company. Arthur wasn't just a biased and cruel manager. He was involved in a conspiracy with Jackson. Together, they had tried to hide financial misconduct and sought a scapegoat to blame. Evelyn became their target simply because she was an easy mark, a poor, elderly black woman with no resources to defend herself. Now the whole truth was revealed. The company was on the brink of collapse, and Arthur and Jackson were both fired and faced criminal prosecution. The public was outraged by how easily a person's life could be destroyed based on racial stereotypes and prejudice. For Evelyn, this moment became a turning point. She realized that her fight had not been in vain, that the power of justice and community support could overturn even the darkest situations. After the truth came to light and Arthur Patterson and Mr. Jackson were exposed, a new chapter began in Evelyn's life. Her name was fully cleared, and the public no longer saw her as guilty, but as a victim of the system she had so bravely fought against. The media campaign not only exonerated her, but also made her a symbol of the fight against racial discrimination and injustice in the workplace. Despite all the support and sympathy, Evelyn remained humble and did not seek attention for herself. The company, facing immense pressure from the public, decided to take further steps. The new leadership not only offered Evelyn compensation for all her suffering, but also made her an offer she never could have imagined. They proposed that she head a new department of corporate social responsibility, aimed at fighting discrimination and bias within the company. This initiative was meant to show the public that the company acknowledged its mistakes and was ready to change. When Evelyn first heard the offer, she was stunned. She had always been a janitor, worked with her hands, and tried not to get involved in management's affairs. But her son Marcus encouraged her and reminded her that it was people like her who could make real change. "Mom," Marcus said with a smile, "you fought for the truth when everyone else stayed silent. You showed that even a simple janitor can change the system. Now you have the chance to do even more. You can help others who find themselves in the same situation as you." Evelyn thought about the offer for a long time, before realizing that it was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. Her entire life, all the humiliations she had endured, had led her to this moment. By accepting the offer, she felt truly empowered, ready to change the world that had been against her for so long. Evelyn began working in the new department and immediately introduced several reforms. Her main goal was to create a support system for employees who might face discrimination. She implemented training programs for all workers, with a special focus on racial justice, equal opportunities, and respect for diversity. Additionally, she helped establish new policies to ensure that such cases of bias would never happen again in the company. Her story became widely known, and Evelyn began receiving invitations to conferences and forums where she shared her experiences and spoke about the importance of fighting injustice. Her speeches were emotional and sincere, which attracted a large audience. Her humility and strength of spirit inspired many. Despite her new status and recognition, Evelyn stayed true to her roots. She often reflected on the times when she spent every day in the shadows of luxurious offices, expecting nothing more. Now, she understood that her place wasn't just in cleaning up after others. Her true power lay in her ability to change the system that had oppressed people like her for so long. As for Arthur and Jackson, they were both brought to trial. Both were punished for their crimes, not only for the fraud, but also for deliberate discrimination. This court case set an important precedent for other workplace discrimination cases. However, for Evelyn, the real victory wasn't in their punishment, but in the fact that her story helped prevent similar cases in the future. Evelyn, who once considered herself invisible, had now become a symbol of change. Her victory was not just a personal triumph, but an example for thousands of other people facing injustice. She had shown that even in the most difficult situations, one can find the strength to fight and win. Now, her life had gained new meaning. She remained close to her family, especially Marcus, who had become her main inspiration and support during difficult times. Together, they continued working towards making the world a fairer place for everyone. The story of Evelyn Brown became a living example that strength of spirit, family support, and confidence in one's rights can overcome any obstacles.